So I hope this video helps somebody. Isolation is not a bad thing, but isolation has been made to be a bad thing. And those who turn to certain aspects of religion or Christianity or whatever the case may be, you may be singing songs that help promote isolation, right? Yolanda Adams' song, Open Up My Heart. Alone in a room, it's just me and you. I feel so lost, I don't know what to do. Now what if I choose the wrong thing to do? I feel so afraid, or something like that, of disappointing you. So I need to talk to you and ask you for your guidance, especially today when my mind seems a little clouded. Guide me until I'm sure I open up my heart, or something to that effect. Don't worry about the run, but it's the words, right? Alone in a room, it's just me and you. I feel so lost, I don't know what to do. Why is that? Because it's not your fault. It's what you were taught. It's not your fault. It's what the culture teaches, right? It's not your fault. It's what society teaches. If you look at Erik Erickson's psychosocial theory of development, one of the stages, right, you've got trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, right? You've got initiative versus guilt. You've got industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, right? But then you've got, here we go, intimacy versus isolation. And the age range for that is approximately 19 years of age to 29 years of age. Well, psychologically, the prefrontal cortex, which has logic, reasoning, impulse control, all those other things, you know, the brain that tells you, don't do that, right? The ego, if you will, right? Unlike the id, which is impulsive. The ego, where if properly cultivated and properly trained, tells you, hey, don't do that, okay? Don't do that. That's not smart. That's not a good thing to do. Here's some things you didn't consider, wisdom, all that great stuff. That prefrontal cortex is still developed during that age range of 19 through 29. At 25 is when it's considered to have been fully developed. During that age range, that's one of the worst times to try to get into an intimate relationship with others. Why? Because according to Erik Erickson, intimacy is supposed to be good and isolation is supposed to be bad. If we look at all the other songs within our culture, within our society that weaponize isolation as a bad thing, it encourages you, along with the psychological need to feel loved and need to feel like you belong, according to Abraham Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or even John Bowlby's attachment theory, to have a secure attachment to be able to go out into the world and grow and try new things, whatever the case may be. When you have psychological discontinuity at these stages, right, and isolation is made to look like a bad thing. When men, women, family, and friends can walk away, an adult operating from a child's perspective, not your fault, no shame, no judgment, but an adult operating from a child's perspective of psychological discontinuity thinks men, women, family, and friends can and have walked away. But if I create my own children, they are mine and they are here to stay. I need someone to love me. So then you create children, and then you put children into a struggle they don't need. Children don't deserve your struggle, and the inner child in you didn't deserve your parents' struggle. So stop weaponizing isolation as a bad thing. How many times have you ended up alone, and depending upon your outlook, your lifestyle, you went on and did things to better the self, right? Strategic isolation is very important to learn early on in childhood, right? Your child attempted to be strategic in isolation when they had their tantrum at what you coined as terrible twos, or what you've been taught to believe that the twos are terrible. No, that's their first attempt to separate from you, develop independence. You got to cultivate that. When the child walked away from you, hey, where do you think you're going? Don't you walk away from me when I talk to you. What are you doing? You are discouraging strategic isolation. Maybe you as a parent are doing too much at the time, and the child needs to practice conflict avoidance and conflict resolution by walking away from you, because you're putting so much on them, outside of their development, and it's just too much. So They talk back. Why? Because that's communication. They walk away from you. Why? Because that's their attempt to get away from insecurity or get away from fear and go position themselves in a state of security and love, because all humans have two primal needs: the need to feel secure and the need to feel in control. That requires strategic isolation. You never need permission to establish a boundary. Children should never need permission from you to learn establishing boundaries, even if it fractures your unaddressed childhood traumas in your adult body and your ego. Right? Alone in a room, it's just me and you. And it's not attacking Yolanda Adams, but the clinical ears hear something different. It's an adult singing from the perspective, unknowingly, of a child stuck in childhood, unaddressed issues, looking to God for guidance, asking the wrong question. Open up my heart? No, you need to open up my senses and expose me to what I don't know. I am alone in that room. It's just me and you. I feel so lost, I don't know what to do, because you haven't been guided. You've been misguided. Now, what if I choose the wrong thing to do? I feel so afraid of disappointing you. But if God is all-knowing, if God is omnipotent, God knows you don't know. God knows your development. He knows you've been misguided. Ask and it shall be given. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. But you got to know what to ask. Like John C. Maxwell said, good leaders ask great questions. You're asking God to open up your heart. Your heart don't need opening. Your heart is still working. Your brain, your learning, your experiences, you need to have your mind opened up, your eyes opened up. In the book Invisible Gorilla, there is such a thing as inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness. Just because you have eyes doesn't mean you have eyes for everything. Once you get exposed to that thing, now you develop eyes for that because you know it exists. You begin to look for it. It's just like when you're going on the lot and you're trying to get a new car, right? And you're looking for this specific car. And then when you leave the car lot, let's just say you leave the car lot and you don't leave with that thing. Now all of a sudden you start seeing all these other cars that look just like the car that you want. Now everybody else want to get that kind of car. No, they've been there. You just didn't have eyes for it. That is a psychological phenomena. Get the book Invisible Gorilla. I'm telling you, when you learn child development and you are an open source learner, you learn human growth and development. You learn what you need to learn to understand that Erik Erickson's theory of intimacy versus isolation, and when society and culture and even your family, I gotta say, shouts out to Kevin Samuels, but Kevin Samuels is wrong in shaming people by a dog die alone, right? No, we don't weaponize isolation. We don't weaponize isolation. There are times where strategic isolation is necessary so you can develop the self. And even Kevin Samuels said that during your Esquire phase is when you need to develop you. But it's hard to do that if all the peer pressure, all the family pressure, all the cultural pressure, all the societal pressure, and the psychological pressure of Erik Erickson's theory, intimacy versus isolation, weaponizes isolation and makes it seem as a bad thing. I don't want to be alone. Meet me at the altar with your white dress. We ain't getting no younger. We might as well do this. Come on, really? Isolation is not a bad thing if you teach people and teach children what to do when they are alone, so that you're not alone in a room. It's just me and you. You don't have to feel so lost. You do know what to do. Now, what if I choose the wrong thing to do? I am so afraid of disappointing you. The definition of disappointment is failure to fulfill the roles and expectations of someone else. Why are you afraid of disappointing God if God knows you don't know? That's because you were around parents who made you feel disappointment and exposed you to the experience of, I feel bad, I feel shamed because I didn't fulfill the expectations of those above me. What are your expectations, and are they reasonable? Were your parents' expectations unreasonable? Those are things you got to think about. This is Instructor Mike, and hopefully you've been trained. Go on ahead and subscribe to this channel, Avoiding Unnecessary Mistakes. And those of you all on other platforms, please go to my new YouTube channel, like, subscribe, share. That's where I'm going to put lifestyle information, encouragement. My new channel, Avoiding Unnecessary Mistakes. This is Instructor Mike, and you've been trained. I'll see ya.